Have you ever been dragged into the spotlight by your own blood, just to serve as a punchline for the elite? I stood there, branded our family's failure, while my brother smirked like a conqueror. He had no idea that a single soft sentence whispered by his boss that night was actually the first domino in the destruction of everything he had spent years constructing. My name is Gabriella Foster, and if there is one thing I have learned in my 38 years of life, it is that humiliation feels remarkably like hypothermia. It starts with a sharp, stinging shock, then a burning sensation that spreads from your chest to your cheeks, and finally, a numbness that settles deep in your bones, making it impossible to move or speak. I was currently in the burning phase. The venue was the Obsidian Lodge in Aspen Ridge, Colorado, a place where the timber beams were older than the country and the chandeliers cost more than the average American mortgage. It was my brother Grant's engagement party, a lavish affair designed not to celebrate love, but to announce a merger. His fiancée, Brielle, was the daughter of a senatorial aide, and Grant was the rising star at Blackwell Logistics. The air in the room smelled of pine, expensive cologne, and the metallic tang of raw ambition. I stood near a pillar wrapped in fairy lights, clutching a glass of sparkling water I had no intention of drinking. I wore a simple navy dress, something off the rack that I had tailored myself to fit better. It was respectable, clean, and utterly invisible in a sea of sequins and velvet. I was only here because my mother had called me 3 times, her voice pitching up into that fragile, wounded tone she used to manipulate me. She said family meant showing up. She said Grant needed everyone in his corner tonight. I should have known that showing up really meant serving as a prop. Grant found me 20 minutes into the cocktail hour. He was already flushed with champagne and the high of being the center of attention. He looked handsome in the way predators often do. His tuxedo sharp, his smile wide but not reaching his eyes. "Gabriella," he boomed, his voice carrying over the low hum of the string quartet. He wrapped an arm around my shoulder, his grip tight enough to bruise. It was a gesture that looked affectionate to an observer but felt like a shackle to me. "Don't hide in the corner. There is someone you have to meet." I tried to pull away gently. "Grant, I'm fine here. Go be with Brielle." "Nonsense," he said, dragging me forward. "Warren is asking about the family, all of the family." My stomach turned. Warren Blackwell, the CEO. The man Grant had been trying to impress for 5 years. The man who held the keys to the executive suite Grant felt he was owed. We cut through the crowd. I felt eyes sliding over me, assessing my worth and dismissing me in the span of a heartbeat. We stopped before a group of men standing near the massive stone fireplace. In the center stood Warren Blackwell. He was older than I expected, perhaps in his early 60s. With steel gray hair and a posture that suggested he didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. He was listening to a man in a burgundy jacket speak, but his eyes were scanning the room with a detached, predatory intelligence. "Mr. Blackwell?" Grant interrupted, his tone shifting instantly from boisterous to obsequious. Warren turned, his eyes landed on Grant, then slid to me. They were dark, unreadable, and intensely focused. "Grant," Warren said. His voice was a low rumble, gravel over velvet. "And who is this?" This was the moment. The standard social contract dictated that Grant would introduce me as his sister, perhaps mention I lived in Denver, and we would exchange polite pleasantries. Grant grinned, a lopsided, cruel expression that I had seen 1,000 times across the dinner table growing up. He squeezed my shoulder harder. "Warren, this is Gabriella," Grant said, pausing for theatrical effect. He looked around the circle of men, inviting them in on the joke. "She is the cautionary tale I told you about. You know how every family has one? This is ours. She is the family failure." The silence that followed was not the respectful silence of a pause in conversation. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of my lungs. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Grant, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to say "just kidding," but he just kept smiling, looking at his boss for approval. He wanted to show Warren that he was cutthroat, that he prioritized success above sentiment, that he could identify weakness even in his own bloodline. My parents, who were standing nearby holding court with Brielle's parents, drifted closer. I looked at my mother, pleading silently, "Say something. Defend me." My mother swirled her Chardonnay, her lips pursed in a tight, pitying smile. "Oh, Grant, don't be so harsh," she said, her voice light and airy. "Gabriella does her best. Not everyone is built for the big leagues. Darling, some people are just meant to be support staff." My father chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "She manages to keep herself fed, mostly. That is a victory in itself, isn't it?" The cruelty was so casual, so practiced. It was a script they had rehearsed for decades, and tonight was the premiere on the main stage. The men around Warren shifted uncomfortably, chuckling nervously, unsure if they should laugh or look away. But Warren Blackwell did not laugh. He did not smile. He did not look at Grant. He did not look at my parents. He looked at me. His gaze was heavy, physical. He studied my face, the line of my jaw, the way I held my chin up despite the urge to sink into the floor. It felt like he was reading a document, scanning for keywords, for 10 agonizing seconds. The only sound in the circle was the crackling of the fire. Grant's smile began to falter. He sensed the joke hadn't landed, but he didn't understand why. She lives in a little studio in the city, has some sort of small business, bookkeeping or something." Warren raised a hand, cutting Grant off mid-sentence. The gesture was small, but it commanded absolute obedience. Grant snapped his mouth shut. Warren took a step closer to me. The heat coming off the fireplace was intense, but the air between us felt charged with electricity. I refused to look down. I had spent my life looking down to appease them. I would not give them that satisfaction tonight, not when they had stripped me bare in public. I met Warren's eyes. I saw something flicker there. Recognition? Confusion? It was gone too fast to be sure. "Gabriella," Warren said, testing the name on his tongue. He didn't say Miss Foster, just Gabriella. "Mr. Blackwell," I replied. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. "You work in finance?" he asked. It wasn't polite conversation. It was an interrogation. "I work in restructuring," I corrected. Grant let out a scoff. "She helps failing bakeries figure out how to pay their rent. Warren, like I said." Warren turned his head slowly to look at Grant. The movement was reptilian. The temperature in the immediate vicinity seemed to drop 10 degrees. Grant's voice died in his throat. "I did not ask you, Grant," Warren said softly. Grant turned a shade of pale that matched the table linens. My parents froze, their wineglasses halfway to their mouths. Warren turned back to me. He looked at me for another long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to place a memory that was just out of reach. He looked at my hands, empty of jewelry, then at my eyes again. Then, he leaned in. He invaded my personal space, close enough that I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. But he didn't look at me. He looked past me, then turned his head slightly so only Grant and I could hear him. "Grant," Warren said. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. "Yes, sir," Grant stammered, sweating now. "Tomorrow morning," Warren said. 8 o'clock. Meet me in my office." Grant blinked, confused. "Oh, sure, absolutely. Warren, we can go over the Q3 projections? I have some great ideas for—" "Just be there," Warren said. He didn't offer an explanation. He didn't offer a handshake. He simply turned his back on Grant, on my parents, and on the entire awkward circle, and walked away toward the bar. Grant stood there, his mouth slightly open, the family failure joke dying a miserable death in the air between us. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and accusation, as if this weird turn of events was somehow my fault. "What did you do?" he hissed at me. "I stood here," I said, my voice cold. "I just stood here. Grant." I didn't wait for his response. The burning in my cheeks had faded, replaced by that deep, bone-chilling cold. I turned and walked away. I walked past my mother, who was staring after Warren with a calculated, worried expression. I walked past my father, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I walked straight out of the double oak doors and into the aspen night. The valet was waiting, shivering in his jacket. The air was biting, perhaps 5 degrees below zero, but I didn't feel it. I handed him my ticket. As I waited for my 10-year-old sedan to be brought around, flanked by Bentleys and Range Rovers, my mind replayed the scene, not the humiliation. I was used to that. I replayed the look in Warren Blackwell's eyes. He hadn't looked at me with pity. He hadn't looked at me with disdain. He had looked at me like he knew me. And for the first time in years, as I drove down the winding mountain road in the dark, leaving the lights of the resort behind, I felt something other than resignation. I felt a spark of curiosity, and underneath that, a very dangerous, very quiet ember of hope. Grant thought he had buried me tonight. He had no idea he had just handed me a shovel. The silence of my apartment in Denver was usually my sanctuary. It was a stark, deliberate contrast to the chaotic, performative noise that followed my family wherever they went. My living space was in the Eldermore district, a converted loft with exposed brick and high windows that looked out over a quiet alley. There were no chandeliers here, no waiters offering champagne, just a large oak desk, 3 monitors, and the humming of a server rack in the corner that held the financial secrets of half a dozen companies that were currently fighting for their lives. My family called me a failure because they did not understand the language of survival. To them, success was a ribbon-cutting ceremony or a photo in a business journal. To me, success was a negative balance sheet turning positive at 2 a.m. I sat at my desk with a mug of black coffee, the steam rising in the cold morning light. The name on my business registration read, Hartwell Bridge Advisory. It sounded traditional, perhaps a bit boring, which was exactly the point. I was a fixer, a ghost in the machine. Companies hired me when they were bleeding cash and could not figure out where the wound was. I came in, I cut the rot, I restructured the debt, and I disappeared before the public ever knew they were on the brink of insolvency. It was surgical work. It required a level of precision and financial literacy that my brother, Grant, could not even comprehend. Yet, to my parents, I was just dang books. They imagined me huddled over a calculator, tallying receipts for grocery stores. They did not know that last year alone, I had navigated a manufacturing firm through a Chapter 11 reorganization that saved 400 jobs. They did not know because I never told them, in the Foster family. If it did not come with a trophy, it did not happen. I took a sip of coffee and looked at the file on my desk. It was not a client file. It was a stack of invoices related to the engagement party I had just walked out of. This was the irony that twisted in my gut like a knife. Grant stood there in his tuxedo calling me a failure. Yet the very tuxedo he wore had been paid for with my credit card because his had been declined at the tailor. I closed my eyes and let the memory from 3 months ago surface. It was a Tuesday. Grant had swung by my office, not to visit, but because he was in the neighborhood and needed to kill time. He had tossed a thick manila envelope onto my desk with the casual arrogance of a king tossing a coin to a beggar. "Take a look at these for me, Gabby," he had said, checking his reflection in my window. "It is some vendor contracts for the new logistics hub. Legal already cleared them, but I figured I would let you feel involved, give you something to do besides counting pennies." He made it sound like charity. He made it sound like he was doing me a favor by letting me touch his important work. I should have thrown them in the shredder. Instead, I opened them. That was my disease. I could not look at a broken thing and not try to fix it. It took me less than an hour to find the trap. The vendor, a concrete supplier based in Nevada, had buried an escalating cost clause on page 42. It was subtle, hidden in dense legality about raw material fluctuations. If Grant had signed that version, the cost of his project would have ballooned by 40% within 6 months. It would have destroyed his budget and likely led to an internal audit. I did not just circle it, I rewrote the entire section. I drafted a counterproposal that capped the liability and locked in the rates for 2 years. I sent it back to him with a note explaining exactly how much money I had just saved him. He never replied to the email. He never said thank you. 2 weeks later, at a family dinner, he bragged about how he had negotiated hard with the suppliers to get a killer deal. My father had clapped him on the back, beaming with pride. I had sat there, cutting my steak, saying nothing. Why? Why did I stay silent? Because silence was safe, because if I spoke up, I was being difficult or jealous of Grant, because somewhere, deep down in the childish part of my brain, I thought that if I kept fixing their messes, eventually they would look at me and see value. I looked back at the invoices on my desk, the florist, the lighting rental, the deposit for the string quartet. Grant had been too busy to handle the logistics of his own engagement party. He had given the vendors my number as a secondary contact when his transfers failed to go through, because Grant lived his life leveraged to the hilt, spending bonuses he had not yet earned. The vendors called me. "We cannot deliver the orchids without the final balance, Ms. Foster," the florist had told me 3 days ago. I could have said no. I could have let the room be bare. I could have let him explain to Brielle why there were no flowers. But I paid it. $7,500. I paid it because the thought of the family name being dragged through the mud by local vendors made my skin crawl. I paid it to keep the illusion alive. I picked up my pen and tapped it rhythmically against the desk. The sound echoed in the empty room. Tap, tap, tap. Last night, Grant had called me a failure. He had done it publicly, with a smile. He had weaponized the very safety net I provided for him. He thought my silence was submission. He thought my lack of flash was a lack of power. But he was wrong. My silence was not submission. It was a ledger, and the debt was overdue. I reached for my phone. There was a notification from my bank. A transfer request I had sent to Grant 4 days ago for the florist bill was still pending. He had ignored it. Of course he had. He probably thought I would just absorb it, like I absorbed his insults, like I absorbed his mistakes. I canceled the request. I was not going to ask for the money back. Not anymore. I was done chasing him for scraps of respect or reimbursement. The memory of Warren Blackwell's eyes flashed in my mind. The way he had looked at me. He saw something the others missed. He saw the mechanic, not the spectator. If Grant wanted to be the big man, the successful executive, the head of the family, then he could stand on his own 2 feet. I was done being the crutch he used to beat me with. I opened my email client and created a new folder. I named it simply Grant. I dragged the email with the corrected contracts into it. I dragged the receipts for the florist, the tailor, and the quartet into it. I dragged the years of correspondence where he asked for loans, for advice, for cover, into it. I was not building a case, not yet. I was simply organizing my assets. My business was restructuring, after all, and sometimes, for a restructure to be successful, the existing management had to be removed. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "You left early. Very rude. Grant is upset. You should apologize." I read the words and waited for the familiar pang of guilt. I waited for the urge to call her, to explain, to beg for forgiveness. But it did not come. The burning, the stinging, the numbness, it was all gone. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. I deleted the text without replying. Grant had an 8 o'clock meeting with Warren Blackwell this morning. He was walking into that office believing he was the golden boy, the heir apparent, the success story. He had no idea that the only reason he had made it this far was because I had been walking behind him, sweeping the glass off the road. I turned back to my screens. I had a client in the retail sector who needed a liquidity forecast by noon. I had real work to do. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but for the first time in a long time, it tasted satisfying. I was not the family failure. I was the family secret. And secrets have a nasty habit of coming out when you least expect them. The phone on my desk rang. It was not my mother. It was not Grant. It was a number I did not have saved. But the area code was local. I picked it up. "Gabriella Foster," I said, my voice steady and professional. "Ms. Foster," a deep, gravelly voice replied. This is Warren Blackwell's executive assistant. Mr. Blackwell would like to know if you are available for a consultation today. I looked at the clock. It was 9 in the morning. Grant's meeting would have just ended. I have an opening this afternoon. I lied. My schedule was wide open, but I was done being available on demand. 2 o'clock then, the voice said. We will send a car. No need, I said. I will drive myself. I hung up the phone. My hand was not shaking. The game had changed. The prop was walking off the stage and into the boardroom, and I had a feeling that by the time I was done, no one would be laughing. The digital clock on the corner of my monitor flipped to 1:55 in the afternoon. I was gathering my portfolio, mentally preparing for the drive to the glass and steel fortress that was the Blackwell Logistics headquarters downtown. I had assumed, naturally, that a man who commanded a fleet of ships and aircraft would expect the world to come to him. I was wrong. The buzzer to my office suite rang. It was a sharp, insistent sound that echoed off the brick walls. I frowned, checking my schedule. I had no other appointments. I walked to the intercom and pressed the button. Yes? I asked. It is Warren, the voice on the other end said. No last name, no title, just Warren. I buzzed him in, my heart doing a strange, traitorous double beat against my ribs. I stood by my desk, smoothing the front of my blazer, watching the heavy metal door. When it opened, the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Warren Blackwell did not just enter a room, he occupied it. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, but he wore it with the indifference of a man who had long ago stopped caring about the price of things. He did not extend a hand. He did not smile. He simply closed the door behind him, shutting out the noise of the hallway, and turned his gaze to my office. I watched him analyze my space. He did not look at the view of the city or the art on the wall, because there was none. He looked at the color-coded filing system on the shelves. He looked at the whiteboard covered in probability trees and debt restructuring formulas. He looked at the singular, ergonomic chair behind the desk and the absence of any guest seating other than 2 functional, stiff-backed chairs. Efficient, he said finally. It was not a compliment, nor was it an insult. It was a categorization. I do not like waste, Mr. Blackwell, I said, gesturing to one of the chairs. Please, I assumed I was coming to you. I wanted to see where the work happens, he said, remaining standing. He walked over to the bookshelf and ran a finger along the spine of a binder labeled Insolvency Protocols. You do not display your degree. My clients do not care where I went to school, I replied, moving behind my desk to create a barrier between us. The energy coming off him was intense, a mix of curiosity and latent danger. They care if I can stop the bleeding. Warren turned to face me. The afternoon sun caught the silver in his hair, highlighting the deep lines etched around his eyes that were currently dissecting me. 15 years ago, he began, his voice low and devoid of preamble. Blackwell Logistics was not a global empire. We were a regional freight carrier in the Midwest, and we were drowning. I had over-leveraged on a fleet expansion right before the oil prices spiked. The banks were circling. My board was drafting my resignation letter. I stayed silent, listening. I knew this story, or at least the public version of it. It was the legend of Warren Blackwell, the phoenix who rose from the ashes. I hired a consultancy firm from Chicago, he continued. Big name, big fees. They sent a team of 4 senior partners to save my company. They spent 3 weeks drinking my coffee and drafting a report that essentially told me to sell off the assets and declare bankruptcy. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a folded, yellowed stack of papers. It was not a full report. It was a stapled appendix, the paper worn soft at the edges from years of handling. He tossed it onto my desk. It landed with a soft thud. But there was an addendum, Warren said. Tucked at the very back of the binder, it was titled Alternative Debt Structuring and Asset Reallocation. It contradicted everything the senior partners said. It proposed a radical freeze on executive pay, a temporary divestment of the trucking arm to fund the air freight expansion, and a renegotiation timeline with creditors that was calculated down to the hour. I stared at the papers. I did not need to pick them up. I knew the font. I knew the formatting. I remembered the smell of the library where I had written it at 3 a.m, fueled by vending machine coffee and the desperate need to prove I existed. The senior partners did not write this, Warren said. When I asked them about it, they dismissed it. They said it was just some number crunching done by a summer intern. They told me to ignore it. He placed both hands on my desk and leaned in, his face inches from mine. I fired the partners. I followed the intern's plan. It took 2 years. But we didn't just survive. We conquered the market. My throat felt tight. I was 23, I whispered. It was my first internship. My supervisor told me my ideas were too aggressive. He only included the addendum to pad the page count of the final deliverable. I know, Warren said. I looked for you, but you had already left the firm. All I had was the initial at the bottom of the spreadsheet. G. Foster. He tapped the paper with his index finger. For 15 years, I have kept this on my desk. Every time I have to make a hard decision, I look at it. It reminds me that the truth is often hidden in the back of the binder, ignored by the people with the fancy titles. He straightened up, the intensity in his eyes softening just a fraction, replaced by something that looked remarkably like respect. Last night, when your brother introduced you, Warren said, his voice dropping to a hush, he called you a failure. I looked at you, standing there in the shadows, taking it, and suddenly, the face clicked. You have the same eyes as the young woman who sat in the corner of that boardroom 15 years ago, taking notes while the men talked over her. I am not that girl anymore, I said, my voice gaining strength. No, Warren agreed. You are better. You are sharper. He paused, letting the silence stretch between us. The person who saved me cannot be a failure, Gabriella, and I do not tolerate liars in my inner circle. I felt a shiver run down my spine. This was the validation I had starved for my entire life. My parents, my brother, my entire world had told me I was nothing. And here was the titan of industry, the man they all worshipped, telling me I had been the architect of his empire. But Warren Blackwell did not come to the Eldermore district just to stroll down memory lane. I looked at his face, the set of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. You did not come here just to thank me for a 15-year-old report, I said. Why are you here, Warren? The warmth evaporated from his eyes instantly, replaced by the cold, hard steel of the businessman. Because history is repeating itself, he said. But in reverse, 15 years ago, a Foster saved my company. Today, I fear a Foster is stealing it. He walked around the desk and stood next to me, looking at my computer screens. I need you to look at something, not as Grant's sister, but as the analyst who wrote that protocol. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and placed it on top of the old report. Grant has been overseeing the Western distribution node for 18 months. Warren said, on paper, it is the most profitable division in the company. The margins are incredible, too incredible. Creative accounting? I asked. I suspect it is more than that, Warren replied. I have my internal audit team looking at it, but they are looking at the surface. They see what Grant wants them to see. And Grant? He paused, choosing his words carefully. Grant is charismatic. He has half the board eating out of his hand. If I accuse him without absolute proof, it will look like a witch hunt. It could destabilize the merger. So you want me to find the proof, I said. It was not a question. I want you to find the truth, Warren corrected. I started seeing discrepancies 3 months ago. Small things. Vendor invoices that did not match shipping manifests, fuel surcharges for routes that do not exist. But every time I pull a thread, the trail disappears. It is being covered up by someone who knows our internal systems better than my auditors do. He looked at me pointedly. I remember you fixed his engagement party contracts, Warren said softly. I heard him bragging about it to a colleague. He said he has a secret weapon for the boring details. I felt a flush of anger. Grant had not only used me, he had bragged about exploiting me. I am not his weapon, I said coldly. Good, Warren said, because I am offering you a job. I want to hire Hartwell Bridge Advisory as an independent external auditor for a specific, classified review of the Western Node. You will have full access, unrestricted. You answer only to me. Grant will go crazy, I said. If he sees me in the system, he will not know until it is too late. Warren assured me. But you need to be prepared for what you might find. If he is doing what I think he is doing, this is not just grounds for termination. It is prison time, federal prison. He let the weight of that hang in the air. He was asking me to be the executioner of my own brother. He was asking me to take the knife I had used to cut the rot out of other companies and turn it on my own blood. I looked at the yellowed papers on my desk. I thought about the way Grant had smirked last night. I thought about the empty chair at my own graduation because Grant had a soccer game. I thought about the thousands of dollars I had quietly paid to keep his image pristine. I looked up at Warren. I charge a retainer, I said, and my rate for emergency forensic accounting is $400 an hour. Warren's lips twitched. It was the closest thing to a smile I had seen from him. I will pay you double, he said. Start digging. Gabriella, I want to know exactly how much of a failure your brother really is. He turned and walked to the door, hand on the knob. He paused. And Gabriella? Yes? Do not fix it this time, he said. Let it break. I intend to, I replied. The door clicked shut. I was alone again in the silence of my office. But the silence had changed. It was no longer a refuge. It was a hunting ground. I picked up the flash drive. It felt heavy in my hand, heavier than plastic and metal should be. It contained the career of the golden child. I plugged it into my computer. The screen flickered to life. I was not just a sister anymore. I was the auditor, and the audit had just begun. The contract sat on my desk like a loaded weapon. It was thick, bound in heavy cream paper, and embossed with the Blackwell Logistics seal. Warren had not been exaggerating about the terms. The document outlined a 6-month engagement as a senior restructuring advisor with full autonomy. The base fee was $300,000, payable in monthly installments, with a performance bonus that could easily double that figure if I identified and stopped the hemorrhaging of capital in the Western Node. It was the kind of money that bought freedom. It was the kind of money that meant I would never have to take a call from a panic-stricken bakery owner at 3 a.m. again. It was the kind of money that commanded respect. But I had not signed it yet. For 48 hours, I had let the document sit there while I stared at the data on the flash drive Warren had left behind. I was hesitating, and I hated myself for it. It was not fear of Grant that held me back. It was the sickening realization of just how deep I would have to cut to get the cancer out. This was not just business anymore. If I signed this, I was walking into my brother's territory, a kingdom he believed he ruled by divine right, and I was going to burn it to the ground. I took a sip of lukewarm water and clicked on the folder labeled Operational Expenses, Q3. Grant was sloppy with his personal life, but as I scrolled through the ledgers, I realized he had been terrifyingly meticulous with his fraud. These were not the clumsy mistakes of an amateur. The expenses were legitimized with a level of sophistication that made my stomach turn. I found a recurring payment to a company called Zenith Maintenance for warehouse upkeep in Nevada. The amounts were variable, which was a smart touch. Flat numbers always triggered audit algorithms. $7,420 one month, $8,150 the next. It looked organic. It looked real. But when I cross-referenced the work orders with the facility logs, the dates did not align. Zenith was billing for roof repairs on days when the warehouse was fully operational with no maintenance crews signed in. They were billing for HVAC overhauls in buildings that Blackwell Logistics did not even own anymore. Grant was not just skimming off the top. He had built a parallel infrastructure of ghost vendors. I moved to the next folder, the Horizon contract. This was the crown jewel of Grant's recent career. My parents had talked about it nonstop for weeks. Grant had secured a massive distribution deal with a tech giant, a contract worth $50 million over 5 years. He had framed the signing page and hung it in his office. I opened the metadata of the proposal document. The author tag did not say Grant Foster. It said S. Martinez. I did a quick search on the company directory. Sophia Martinez was a junior analyst hired 8 months ago. I dug deeper into the edit history. Sophia had spent 120 hours working on the document. She had drafted the risk assessment, the pricing model, and the logistical flow. Grant's contribution? He had opened the file 4 times. Once to change the cover page to include his name, once to export it to PDF, and twice to change the font size. He had stolen the entire project. He had taken the work of a brilliant young woman, slapped his name on it, and claimed the glory while she likely sat in a cubicle praying for a raise that would never come. It made my blood boil. But it was not illegal. It was just corporate cannibalism. Then I saw the emails. Warren had included a dump of Grant's external correspondence with the board of directors. I started reading them, looking for incriminating admissions. Instead, I found something that made my skin crawl. We need to leverage our liquid assets to create a buffer against market volatility, Grant wrote in an email dated 2 months ago. It is about maintaining a dynamic solvency ratio. I froze. Dynamic solvency ratio. That was not a standard industry term. It was a phrase I had coined. I used it in my own internal notes to describe a specific way of balancing short-term debt against inventory turnover. I had never published it. I had never used it in a public report. The only time I had ever used that phrase was in a private email to Grant 4 years ago, when he had begged me to help him understand a complex balance sheet before a job interview. I frantically searched the drive for more. There were dozens of them. Emails where Grant used phrases like structural debt elasticity and forensic capital allocation. These were my words, my voice. He was stripping parts of my personality, parts of my professional soul, and wearing them like a costume to sound competent. But here was the catch. He was using them wrong. In one email, he argued that increasing capital viscosity was a positive indicator for the quarter. Viscosity meant resistance to flow. In finance, you wanted capital to flow, not to stick. He was trying to sound like me, trying to mimic the sister he called a failure, but he did not understand the language he was speaking. He was a parrot repeating a symphony he could not hear. I was shaking. It was a violation deeper than theft. He had built his entire persona on the scraps of wisdom he had scavenged from me, all while publicly spitting on my name. My computer chimed, a secure message from Warren Blackwell. Check the routing numbers on the Zenith payments. Look at the beneficiary. I switched tabs back to the bank records. I traced the routing number for Zenith Maintenance. It led to a holding company in Delaware. I peeled back that layer. That holding company was owned by an LLC in the Cayman Islands. And the signatory for the LLC? It was not Grant. The signature was a messy, hurried scrawl, but it was legible enough. G. Foster. My heart stopped. He was not just stealing my words, he was setting me up. If anyone looked at this quickly, if an auditor just glanced at the initial and the last name, they would see G. Foster and think of the financial consultant sister, not the executive brother. He was laying a trail of breadcrumbs that led straight to my door. He was using my identity as a shield for his embezzlement. I picked up my phone and dialed Warren's private number. He answered on the first ring. "You saw it," Warren said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly so. "He used my initial," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He set up the shell companies to look like they are mine." "It is a classic deflection," Warren replied. "If the scheme collapses, he claims he was a victim of his sister's manipulation. He claims you used your financial expertise to trick him. He paints himself as the trusting brother and you as the predator." "He is trying to frame me," I said, the realization settling over me like a shroud. "That is why he called me a failure in public. He is establishing a narrative. If I am the desperate, jealous failure, it makes sense that I would steal from him." "Exactly," Warren said. "He is not just greedy, Gabriella. He is strategic. He has been planning this for a long time." "Why?" I asked. "Why do this to his own family?" "Because he is weak," Warren said. And weak men will burn the world to convince themselves they are strong. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I looked at the contract again. The $300,000 seemed insignificant now. This was no longer about a career opportunity. This was about survival. If I walked away, if I refused this job, Grant would continue. He would eventually get caught. And when he did, he would point the finger at me. And without access to the internal data, without the power of the Blackwell machine behind me, I would be defenseless. I would go to prison for his crimes. I am in, I said into the phone. Good, Warren said. The legal team has the papers ready. But Gabriella? Yes? Trust no one inside that building. Grant has allies. He has bought loyalty with the money he stole. You are walking into a nest of vipers. I know, I said. But they have never met a mongoose before. I hung up. I pulled the contract toward me. I uncapped my pen. My hand was steady. I signed my name at the bottom of the page. Gabriella Foster. The same name Grant had tried to weaponize. I scanned the document and sent it back to Warren. Then, I did something crucial. I took the flash drive and copied the entire contents to an encrypted server that I kept off-site. I printed hard copies of the Zenith invoices and the metadata from the Horizon contract. I went to the wall safe behind a painting in my office, a painting Grant had once called cheap motel art, and locked the physical evidence inside. I was not going to play fair. I was going to play to win. Grant wanted a war? He wanted to drag me into the spotlight? Fine. I stood up and walked to the window. The Denver skyline was jagged against the setting sun. Tomorrow, I would walk into Blackwell Logistics not as a guest, not as a sister, but as the auditor. I picked up my phone again and composed a text to my mother. I am sorry I left early. I have been very busy with work. I think you will be seeing a lot more of me soon. I hit send. Let them think I was apologizing. Let them think I was folding. The game had officially begun. And unlike Grant, I knew the rules. The glass walls of Grant's corner office were designed to project transparency, but from where I sat, they felt more like the viewing pane of an interrogation room. It was 3 days into my tenure as the special auditor, and while the general staff whispered about the external consultant prowling the servers, Grant had finally summoned me. He did not look like the conquering hero of the engagement party anymore. The aspen glow had faded, replaced by a sallow, grayish cast to his skin. His tie was loosened, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of expensive moisturizer could hide. "Close the door," he said. It was not a request. I pushed the heavy glass door shut until it clicked. The soundproofing was excellent. The bustle of the trading floor outside vanished instantly. "You look tired, Grant," I said, taking the seat opposite him. I did not cross my legs. I sat squarely, feet flat on the floor, grounded. "I am not tired. Gabby, I am besieged," he snapped, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Warren is freezing accounts. He is asking questions about logistics routes that have been on autopilot for years. And now I hear you are digging through the Zenith archives." He leaned forward, his elbows on the mahogany desk. He tried to summon that charming, brotherly smile, the one that used to make me do his homework when we were 12. "I need a favor," he said. "I am here to work, Grant, not to do favors." "This is work," he insisted, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, I made a few judgment calls, unconventional routing, to save the company money on taxes. You know how it is. Sometimes you have to move capital through a few distinct channels to avoid the regulatory drag." "Unconventional routing," I repeated flatly. "Is that what we are calling embezzlement now?" Grant flinched. "Don't use that word. It is ugly. It is aggressive." "It is accurate," I said. "I saw the payments to Zenith. I saw the Cayman holding company." Grant's face hardened. The charm evaporated, leaving behind something desperate and ugly. He stood up and walked to the window, keeping his back to me. "I need you to validate the structure," he said to the glass. "I need you to write a memo. Backdate it to last year. Say that you consulted on the setup. Say that the G. Foster on the incorporation papers refers to your advisory firm, acting as an external proxy for Blackwell Logistics. Say it was a strategic tax shelter. I stared at his back, stunned by the audacity. You want me to claim your crime as my strategy? It is not a crime if an auditor signs off on it, he shouted, spinning around. If you validate it, it becomes legitimate. Warren trusts you. If you say it is clean, he will back off. I cannot do that, Grant. You can. He stepped closer, looming over me. And you will. Think about Mom and Dad. Do you know how proud they are right now? Mom is finally happy. Gabby, for the first time in years, she is not popping pills to sleep because she is worried about money. I bought them the house in Florida. I paid off Dad's medical bills. With stolen money, I said. With our money, he roared. I earned it. I brought in the Horizon contract. I built this division. I deserve a cut. And you owe me. I stood up slowly. I owe you nothing. I protected you, he spat. Growing up, who kept the bullies away? Who made sure you were invited to things? I let you tag along. I let you feel important. And this is how you repay me? By destroying my life 2 months before my wedding? You destroyed your own life when you decided to treat a Fortune 500 company like your personal piggy bank, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. I am not signing anything. Grant stared at me, his chest heaving. Then, a slow, cruel smirk spread across his face. It was the same expression he wore when he used to hold my head underwater in the pool, just long enough to make me panic. You really don't get it, do you? He asked softly. You think you are the hunter here, but you are already in the trap. He walked back to his desk and unlocked a drawer. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the mahogany surface toward me. It was a printout of an email. From Gabriella. Foster at Hartwell Advisory, to Grant. Foster at Blackwell Logistics, subject, authorization for Zenith Capital Injection, date, October 14th, 2 years ago. Grant, per our discussion, I have set up the offshore entity to handle the surplus from the Western Node. Proceed with the transfers as discussed. I will manage the ledger from my end to keep it off the primary books. I read the words, and the room seemed to tilt. This is fake, I said. I never wrote this. It looks real. Grant shrugged. It has your header, your signature block, and it is stored on a secure server that I control. If I go down, Gabby, this email goes to the FBI. It goes to Warren. It goes to the state licensing board. You forged my email, I whispered. I took insurance, he corrected. I knew you were smart. I knew you might get jealous and try to sabotage me. So I made sure that if the ship sinks, we are handcuffed together to the anchor. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee and mints. You are the failure, remember? That is the story everyone knows. The desperate, struggling sister who needed cash. It makes perfect sense that you would mastermind a little fraud to pay your rent. I am the golden boy. Who are they going to believe? The executive with the $50 million contract, or the spinster with the one-room office? I felt a wave of nausea, but I forced it down. He was right about the narrative. He had spent years crafting it for this exact moment. So here is the deal, Grant said, sitting back down and putting his feet up on the desk. You are going to write that report clearing the Zenith accounts. You are going to tell Warren that everything is in order, and then you are going to resign and go back to your little life. If you do that, this email disappears. If you don't... He mimed an explosion with his hands. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I need time to draft the report, I said. It was the only thing I could say to get out of that room. You have 24 hours, Grant said. Get out. I walked out of the office, my legs feeling like lead. I navigated the maze of cubicles, keeping my head down, until I reached the privacy of the elevator. As the doors closed, I leaned against the metal wall and exhaled a breath I felt like I had been holding since childhood. I pulled my phone out, The buzz had been a text message. It was from Brielle, Grant's fiancée. "We know you are trying to ruin the wedding. Grant told me everything. Don't think you can hurt us without hurting yourself. Be a good sister for once." She knew. He had recruited her into the conspiracy. She was not just a bystander. She was an accomplice. They were a team, united by greed and the absolute certainty that I was weak. I walked out of the building and into the cold Denver air. I did not go to my car immediately. I walked to a park bench a block away and sat down. Grant thought he had checkmated me. He thought the fake email was his ace in the hole. But he had made a critical error. He assumed that the email he showed me was the only copy. He assumed that because he controlled the server where he planted it, he controlled the truth. I pulled out my laptop from my bag and connected to the secure hotspot on my phone. I logged into the Blackwell system using the administrative credentials Warren had given me, credentials Grant did not know I had. I found the email he had shown me. It was sitting in a hidden subfolder in his inbox. I did not delete it. That would look suspicious. Instead, I opened the command line interface. I pulled the metadata for that specific email file. Every digital file has a fingerprint. It tells you not just when it was created, but on what machine, and by which user ID. Grant had backdated the sent date to 2 years ago. But he could not change the server's creation timestamp without wiping the entire drive. There it was. Creation date. Yesterday, 3:45 in the afternoon. Origin IP. Internal network. Node 4. Grant Foster's terminal. He had created the 2-year-old email yesterday. I took a screenshot, then another. I traced the IP address just to be sure. It matched his office computer perfectly. Then, I went deeper. I searched for any other files created in that same time frame. I found a draft folder. In it was another email. This one seemingly from me to my father, apologizing for getting Grant involved in my mess. He was scripting a confession for me. He was writing the suicide note for my career. My hands stopped shaking. The fear was gone. Grant wanted a narrative? I would give him one, but it would not be the story of the jealous sister. It would be the story of the desperate, flailing executive who tried to frame the auditor because he knew he was caught. I saved everything to my external drive. Then, I opened a new email draft addressed to Warren Blackwell. I did not send it yet. I needed one more piece. I needed to tie the money directly to him, undeniable and concrete, so that even his G. Foster shell game would not save him. I looked at the text from Brielle again. "Don't think you can hurt us." Us. If Brielle was involved, she was a liability. Grant was arrogant. But Brielle was social. She liked to spend, and spenders left trails. I typed Brielle's name into the search bar of the financial database. Grant was smart enough to keep his name off the direct transfers. But was he smart enough to hide his fiancée's shopping habits? The search results populated. And there it was, a corporate credit card issued to Consultant B. Miller, Brielle's maiden name. It was paid automatically each month from the Zenith maintenance account. The charges were not for warehouse repairs. They were for bridal boutiques in New York, a venue deposit in Italy, a jeweler in Aspen. Grant was not just stealing to buy our parents a house. He was stealing to fund the wedding of the century. I closed my laptop. Grant gave me 24 hours. I only needed 12. I stood up. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. I was not going back to my office. I was going to the one place Grant would never look for me. I was going to the archives of the county clerk, where the real G. Foster signatures were stored on paper, ink, and bond. He wanted to use the family name as a weapon? Fine. I would show him exactly how heavy that name could be when it fell on you. The folder on my secure drive was no longer just a collection of files. It was a coffin, and I had spent the last 12 hours hammering in every single nail. I sat in the small, soundproofed conference room adjacent to the legal department on the 42nd floor. It was 7 in the morning. The city of Denver was barely waking up, a gray haze over the mountains. But I had not slept. I had spent the night conducting a forensic linguistic analysis that would stand up in any federal court. I placed 2 documents side by side on the projection screen, ready for the meeting. On the left was a genuine email I had written to a client 4 years ago. On the right was the forgery Grant had shown me in his office, the email that was supposed to incriminate me. To the untrained eye, they looked identical. The font was the same. The signature block was perfect, but I knew my own voice, and more importantly, I knew the science of syntax. I highlighted the verbs. In my genuine writing, 95% of my sentences were active. I recommend. We must liquidate. The data suggests. In Grant's forgery, the language was passive. It is suggested. The funds were moved. Authorization is granted. It was a subconscious tell. Grant was a man who avoided responsibility, even in his writing. He could not bring himself to use a direct subject-verb agreement because deep down, he was always looking for a way to say it wasn't his fault. I checked the timestamp analysis one last time. I had cross-referenced the creation time of the forged email, 3:45 in the afternoon on Tuesday, with the security logs from the building's badge readers. At 3:45 on the date the email was supposedly sent 2 years ago. I was not even in the state of Colorado. I was at a restructuring conference in Chicago. I had the flight manifest and the hotel receipt to prove it. The door opened. Warren Blackwell walked in, followed by Elias Thorne, the general counsel for Blackwell Logistics. Elias was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite, with a reputation for destroying opposition with a single polite letter. "Is it done?" Warren asked. He did not look at me. He looked at the screen. "It is," I said. "I have the IP trace. I have the metadata. I have the linguistic profile. And I have the financial link to the bridal shops." Elias Thorne stepped forward and scrolled through the dossier I had prepared. He pushed his glasses up his nose. He read the section on the Zenith Maintenance Shell Company. He paused at the page showing the credit card charges for Brielle's wedding dress. "This is thorough," Elias said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The intent to defraud is clear. The attempt to frame an external auditor adds a layer of malicious intent that will nullify his severance package immediately." "Severance?" I asked, my voice sharp. "We are talking about prison. Mr. Thorne." "We are talking about leverage," Warren corrected. "We play this out today, right now." He checked his watch. "Grant is in the boardroom. He thinks we are meeting to discuss the quarterly projections for the Western Node. He thinks you resigned last night." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Let's go." The walk to the boardroom felt like a funeral procession. The hallways were quiet. As we approached the double glass doors, I could see Grant inside. He was leaning back in his chair, laughing at something on his phone, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had successfully bullied his sister into submission and was ready to collect his $50 million bonus. Warren opened the door. Grant spun around, a winning smile plastered on his face. "Warren, good morning," he said, standing up. "I have the new numbers for—" He stopped. He saw Elias. And then, he saw me. The smile did not just fade. It shattered. For a split second, I saw the panic flare in his eyes, raw and terrified, before he masked it with a look of confused indignation. "Gabriella?" he asked, his voice pitching up. "What are you doing here? I thought you decided that this environment wasn't a good fit for you." He was sticking to the script. He was trying to signal to me that I should be leaving. "Sit down, Grant," Warren said. He did not raise his voice. He walked to the head of the table and sat. Elias took the seat to his right. I took the seat directly across from Grant. "I don't understand," Grant said, laughing nervously. "Is this a performance review? Because if it is, I think my numbers speak for themselves." "They certainly do," Elias said. He placed a single file folder on the table. "Though perhaps not the numbers you are thinking of." Warren pressed a button on the console. The blinds on the glass walls descended, sealing us in. The lights dimmed, and the projector hummed to life. The first slide appeared. It was the invoice from Zenith Maintenance. $8,000 for roof repairs in a warehouse we sold 3 years ago. Warren read from the screen. Grant's face went pale. but he recovered quickly. That must be a clerical error. Accounting makes mistakes. I will have my team look into it. We already looked into it, I said. Grant glared at me. I am talking to the CEO, Gabriella, not the consultant. Next slide, Warren said. The screen changed. It showed the corporate registration for Zenith Maintenance in the Cayman Islands, listing G. Foster as the signatory. Grant let out a sigh, shaking his head with a performance of deep disappointment. He looked at Warren with pleading eyes. Warren, I didn't want it to come to this. I tried to protect her. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Gabriella set this up. She came to me 2 years ago. She was in debt. She begged me to help her find a consulting gig. I didn't know she was routing money through shell companies until last week. That is why I called her a failure at the party. I was angry. I was trying to distance the family from her mess. It was a good lie. If I had been the person I was a week ago, timid, silent, eager to please, it might have worked. That is a compelling story, Grant, Elias said. But we have a problem with the timeline. Next slide, Warren commanded. The screen shifted to the forged email, the one Grant had threatened me with. This is the email she sent me, Grant shouted, seizing the moment. See? She admits it. I have set up the offshore entity. It is right there in black and white. Look at the metadata. Grant, I said softly. I pressed the remote. A red box appeared around the technical details at the bottom of the screen. Creation date, Tuesday, October 21st. Current year, 3:45 post-meridiem. Source IP, Workstation G Foster Exec 01. The room went dead silent. The hum of the projector fan sounded like a jet engine. You created this email 48 hours ago, I said. On your computer, inside this building. Grant stared at the screen. His mouth opened, closed, and opened again. That is a glitch. The server is wrong. She hacked me. She is a hacker. Warren, she manipulated the logs. Gabriella was in Chicago on the date this email was supposedly sent 2 years ago, Elias said, reading from a sheet of paper. We have her hotel folio. Unless she can teleport, she did not send this email. Grant stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. This is a setup. You are all ganging up on me. I brought in the Horizon contract. I made this company millions. Next slide, I said. The screen changed to the credit card statement. Bridal Bliss Boutique, $12,000. Venetian Palazzo deposit, $25,000, all paid by Zenith Maintenance. Did I also buy your fiancé's wedding dress, Grant? I asked. Did I hack your wedding plans too? Grant looked at the numbers. He looked at the undeniable proof that he had used company funds to pay for his vanity. The fight went out of him all at once. He slumped back into his chair, looking small, defeated, and incredibly young. I was going to pay it back, he whispered. It was just a loan. The bonus from the Horizon deal. It was coming next month. I was going to put it all back. You were going to pay it back with the bonus you didn't earn? I asked. The bonus from the contract Sophia Martinez wrote? Grant flinched as if I had slapped him. Warren leaned forward. His face was stone. You stole from me, Grant. That is bad. You lied to me. That is worse. But you tried to frame the person who saved this company 15 years ago. That is unforgivable. Warren, please, Grant stammered, tears forming in his eyes. My family, my reputation. Your reputation is gone, Warren said. The only question now is whether your freedom goes with it. Elias slid a document across the table toward Grant. This is a confession, Elias said. It details the embezzlement, the fraud, and the attempted framing of an external auditor. It also includes a full liquidation clause of your personal assets to repay the stolen funds. Grant looked at the paper with horror. If I sign this, I lose everything. The house, the cars, the wedding. If you don't sign it, Elias said calmly. The FBI is waiting in the lobby. We called them an hour ago. They are very interested in wire fraud across state lines. Grant looked at me. He was searching for the sister who used to cover for him. He was looking for the Gabriella who would take the fall to keep the peace. "Gabby," he choked out. "Please, help me. Tell them. Tell them we can work this out. Mom and Dad, this will kill them." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had mocked me in front of the elite of Aspen. I looked at the man who had threatened to send me to prison to save his own skin. "Mom and Dad are resilient," I said. "They survived having a failure for a daughter. They will survive having a criminal for a son." I stood up. "Sign the paper, Grant. It is the only deal you are going to get." Grant's hand shook as he picked up the pen. He looked at the document, then at the door. Realizing there was no one coming to save him, he was alone in the room with the truth, and for the first time in his life, he couldn't charm his way out of it. He signed. Warren picked up the paper, checked the signature, and nodded to Elias. "Get security," Warren said. "Escort him out. He is banned from the premises effective immediately." "Warren," Grant pleaded, standing up as 2 security guards entered the room. "After everything I did? After 5 years?" Warren turned his back on him. He looked at me. "Gabriella," Warren said, "we have a lot of work to do to clean this mess up. Are you ready?" "I am," I said. I did not look back as Grant was led away. I heard him shouting my name as the doors closed, a desperate, angry sound that faded into the hallway. The silence returned to the boardroom, but this time, it wasn't heavy, it was clean. It was the silence of a balance sheet that had finally, after years of errors, been corrected to 0. The fallout from Blackwell Logistics was swift and brutal, but it was sterile. It happened in boardrooms, on spreadsheets, and in legal filings. It was a clean amputation. The war with my family, however, was a gangrenous infection. It was messy. It smelled of old resentments, and it refused to stay contained within business hours. Grant had been escorted out of the building on a Tuesday. By Thursday, the investigation had widened to include federal scrutiny. By Friday evening, my phone had become a brick of toxic notifications. My mother had left 19 voicemails. Not one of them asked if I was okay. Not one of them asked for the truth. They ranged from weeping hysteria to cold, sharp accusations that I had lost my mind and was acting out of spite. They did not care that Grant was a criminal. They only cared that I had turned on the lights and revealed the cockroaches. I had intended to ignore them, to retreat to my apartment and let the lawyers handle the noise. But then the summons came. It was not a text or a call. It was a hand-delivered note on thick, cream-colored cardstock from my great-aunt Beatrice. Beatrice was the matriarch of the Foster line. She was 82, sharp as a tack, and sat on a pile of old money that my parents had been waiting to inherit for 3 decades. She had never liked Grant much. She called him oily, but she valued family reputation above all else. Dinner, Saturday, 7 o'clock. Attendance is mandatory. I could have refused. I could have stayed home. But if I did not go, Grant would control the narrative. He would spin a tale of a jealous, vindictive sister destroying his life. I had to finish what I started. I arrived at Beatrice's Victorian mansion in the Highlands district at 6:55. The house smelled of lavender and dust. The dining room was dimly lit. The long mahogany table set with the good silver. My parents were already there. My mother, eyes red and puffy, was clutching a handkerchief. My father was pacing, nursing a scotch. And Grant was there. He looked wrecked. He was unshaven, wearing a wrinkled polo shirt, a stark contrast to his usual tailored suits. He was slumped in a chair, staring at the tablecloth. When I walked in, the air in the room was sucked out. "You have the nerve to show your face," my mother hissed, standing up. Her voice was trembling. "After what you did to your brother? After you humiliated us?" "I did not do anything to him, Mother," I said, taking my seat calmly. "Grant did it to himself. I just read the numbers." "Numbers," my father spat. "You ruined his life over numbers. You could have fixed it. You always fix things. You could have covered it up, put it back, made it go away. That is what family does." "That is what accomplices do," I corrected. "Enough," Aunt Beatrice said. She entered the room leaning on a cane, but she moved with authority. She took her place at the head of the table. "Sit down. Ray, you too. Diane, we are going to eat, and we are going to talk." The maid served the roast beef in silence. No one ate. The tension was so thick it felt like a physical weight pressing down on our chests. "Grant says you framed him," Beatrice said, cutting a piece of meat with surgical precision. She didn't look up. "He says you were jealous of his success and planted false evidence." "She did," Grant shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "She has always been jealous. She sits in that little office counting pennies while I was out there making deals. She couldn't stand that I was the one winning." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the bluster. He was terrified. He was facing prison, and his only defense mechanism was to regress to a 12-year-old boy blaming his sister for the broken vase. "Is that true, Gabriella?" Beatrice asked, finally looking at me. Her eyes were clouded with age but piercing. "No," I said, and I brought receipts. I reached into my bag. I did not bring the Blackwell audit files. Those were confidential. Instead, I brought a different folder, a personal one. "You talk about me being jealous," I said to the room. "You talk about me needing to support the family. Let's talk about support." I pulled out a stack of bank transfers dating back 10 years. 7 years ago, I said, sliding a paper toward Beatrice. Grant started a tech venture. It failed in 4 months. He owed $15,000 to a developer who was threatening to sue. Dad called me, begging me to help so Grant wouldn't have a record. I looked at my father. He looked away. "I paid it," I said. "I drained my savings account. I was 26. I ate instant noodles for 3 months to cover that debt." I slid another paper. 5 years ago, Grant crashed his car into a parked vehicle while driving under the influence. No police report, because I paid the owner of the other car $12,000 in cash to settle it privately. I took out a personal loan to do that. My mother gasped. You said you had extra money from a bonus." "I lied," I said. "I worked 2 jobs. I did taxes for strangers on weekends to pay off the loan I took for your son." I kept sliding papers. The table was filling up with the history of Grant's failures and my silent rescues. Rent, credit card debt, legal fees, gambling debts. I listed them off, my voice steady. "For a decade, I have been the safety net. I have been the janitor cleaning up his messes so he could pretend to be the golden boy. And every time, you told me it was my duty. You told me I had to protect him because he was special, because he was going to be the one to carry the family name." Grant was shaking. That doesn't matter. That is ancient history. We are talking about now. We are talking about patterns, Grant," I said. "You have never succeeded at anything without me paying the price for it. Blackwell Logistics was just the first time I refused to pay." Aunt Beatrice picked up the papers. She adjusted her glasses, reading the amounts. She looked at my parents. "Is this true?" she asked. "Did you know she was paying for all of this?" We thought she could afford it," my mother stammered. "She has no husband, no children. What else does she have to spend money on? Grant has a life to build. He has expectations." "So you bled one child dry to prop up the other," Beatrice said, her voice disgusted. "We did what we had to do," my father shouted, his face turning purple. "Grant had potential. We couldn't let him fail over petty cash problems. Gabriella didn't mind. She never complained." "I am complaining now," I said. "You are ungrateful," my mother sobbed. "After everything we gave you." "What did you give me?" I asked. "You gave me the bill. You gave me the responsibility. But you never gave me the one thing that actually belonged to me." This was the card I had been holding back, the Ace of Spades. During the audit of Grant's personal accounts to track the stolen funds, I had found a transfer from 5 years ago. It had nothing to do with Blackwell, but it had everything to do with why I was sitting at this table. "Grandfather Arthur," I said. The name made the room go quiet. He was Beatrice's brother, my grandfather, who had passed away 6 years ago. "When grandfather died," I continued, He left a trust, $50,000 for each grandchild. It was supposed to be distributed when we turned 30. I looked at my parents. They had gone pale. Even Grant stopped his fidgeting. I never received that money, I said. When I asked you about it, Dad, you told me the estate was smaller than expected. You told me the lawyers took it all in fees. You told me there was nothing left. I pulled out the final document. It was a copy of a bank authorization form from the family trust. But that was a lie. The money was there, $50,000 earmarked for Gabriella Foster. I pointed to the signature at the bottom of the release form. You forged my signature, I said to my father. You signed my name, claimed the funds on my behalf, and then you transferred the entire amount, $50,000, into Grant's account. I looked at Grant. That was the money you used to put the down payment on your condo, wasn't it? The condo you bragged about buying with your shrewd investments? The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a grave. Aunt Beatrice stared at her brother, my father, with a look of pure horror. In her world, you could forgive a lot of things, but stealing from family inheritance was a cardinal sin. It was a violation of the blood code. Ray, Beatrice whispered, tell me she is lying. My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He couldn't deny it. The paper trail was right there. We had to, my mother cried out, breaking the silence. Grant needed the down payment. He was dating Brielle. He needed to look successful. If he didn't have that condo, she wouldn't have taken him seriously. We were investing in his future. Gabriella didn't need it. She was fine. She lives in that loft. She drives that old car. She is happy with less. I am happy with less because you stole my more, I said. Grant suddenly laughed. It was a jagged, hysterical sound. Oh, boo-hoo, Grant sneered. He stood up, knocking his chair over. So they gave me the money. So what? I was the one who was going to make millions. I was the one who was going to elevate this family. That $50,000 was an investment, and I would have paid it back 10 times over if you hadn't sabotaged me. He glared at me with pure hatred. You are just a bitter, lonely spinster, Gabriella. That is all you are. You tried to destroy me because you know you will never be me. You will never be the one people look at when you walk into a room. You are just the help. You are just the accountant. He looked around the room, seeking validation, seeking someone to nod and say, yes, Grant, you are the special one. But no one nodded. My father was staring at his hands. My mother was weeping into her napkin, but her cries sounded hollow now, and Aunt Beatrice was looking at Grant like he was a stranger. You stole her inheritance, Beatrice said slowly, and you think you were entitled to it. I was, Grant shouted. I am the son. I am the one carrying the name. You are a thief, Beatrice said. Her voice was ice. And you are a disappointment. Grant froze. Those words, coming from the head of the family, hit him harder than the indictment. Aunt B, he started. Do not speak to me. She cut him off. She turned to my parents. And you? You enabled this? You forged a signature? That is a felony. Ray, you stole from your own daughter to feed this delusion. Beatrice stood up. She picked up the stack of papers I had laid out. I have heard enough, she said. The dinner is over. She looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw something soft in her expression. It wasn't pity. It was an apology. Gabriella, she said, you will stay. We have things to discuss regarding your grandfather's estate. I believe there are discrepancies that I need to correct from my own personal funds. No, Grant screamed. You can't give her money. She ruined me. She is the enemy. He lunged toward the table, grabbing the papers, trying to tear them up, trying to destroy the evidence of his mediocrity. Grant, my father shouted, standing up to restrain him. Get off me! Grant shoved our father away. My father stumbled back, hitting the sideboard. A vase, an antique Ming vase that Beatrice loved, wobbled and crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. The sound of the breaking porcelain seemed to snap the last thread of tolerance in the room. Grant stood there, panting, surrounded by the shards of the vase and the ruins of his reputation. He looked at me, his eyes wild. "I will fix this," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "I can fix this. I just need time. I just need a loan. Mom, I need a retainer for a lawyer. I need $20,000. Just until the hearing." My mother looked up. She looked at her golden boy, the son she had sacrificed everything for, the son she had stolen from me to protect, and finally, after 38 years, the spell broke. She saw him not as a future CEO, but as a 40-year-old man standing over a broken vase, begging for money he would never repay. "I don't have it, Grant," she whispered. "We gave you everything. We don't have anything left." Grant looked at her, stunned. Then he looked at Beatrice. "Get out of my house," Beatrice said. Grant looked at me one last time. He wanted to say something hurtful, something that would put me back in my place, but he had no ammunition left. I had taken it all. He turned and stormed out of the dining room. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. I sat there in the silence, listening to the grandfather clock ticking in the hall. My parents refused to look at me. They were small, shrunken figures, weighed down by the truth they could no longer hide. "I am sorry about the vase, Aunt Beatrice," I said quietly. "It was a fake," Beatrice replied, sitting back down and smoothing her napkin. "Just a reproduction. I keep the real one in the vault." She looked at my parents, then at me. "It seems," she said, "that we have been valuing the wrong things in this family for a very long time." I took a sip of water. It was cool and clean. The family battlefield was littered with casualties. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't one of them. I was the last one standing. The silence in the dining room was not the peaceful kind. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb before the lid is sealed. The shards of the Ming vase lay scattered on the Persian rug like jagged teeth. My parents were frozen in their chairs, diminished and gray, staring at the mahogany table as if it might open up and swallow them whole. Grant had stormed out moments ago, the front door vibrating with the force of his exit. I thought he was gone, fleeing into the night to lick his wounds. But Aunt Beatrice remained seated, her posture rigid, her hands folded over the silver handle of her cane. She did not look at the broken vase. She looked at the empty doorway where Grant had vanished. "Robert," she said calmly to the butler standing in the shadows, "bring him back." "He has likely driven off, madam," Robert said. "He has not," Beatrice said, her voice carrying a terrifying certainty. "I instructed security to lock the main gates the moment everyone arrived. No one leaves until I'm satisfied. Bring my nephew back here." My mother looked up, her face streaked with mascara. "Beatrice, please, let him go. He is upset. He is not thinking straight." "He is thinking perfectly straight, Diane," Beatrice replied. "He is thinking about self-preservation. That is the only thing he has ever thought about." 5 minutes later, the heavy oak doors swung open. 2 burly security guards escorted Grant back into the room. He was not struggling, but he looked cornered, his eyes darting around the room with the frantic energy of a trapped rat. "This is kidnapping," Grant shouted, though his voice cracked. "You can't keep me here. I have rights." "You have nothing," Beatrice said. "Sit down." Grant hesitated, then slumped into the chair furthest from me. He refused to look at me. "We are done here," Grant muttered. "Gabriella made her point. She humiliated me. She won. What more do you want? Blood?" "I want the truth," I said. "All of it." "You have the truth," Grant spat. "I took the $50,000 from the trust. Fine, I admitted it. Are you happy?" "That is not what I'm talking about," Aunt Beatrice interrupted. She reached down and picked up a thick, leather-bound portfolio that had been resting by her feet. I had not noticed it before. She placed it on the table with a heavy thud. "For the last hour, we have listened to Gabriella present evidence of how she saved you," Beatrice said, her fingers unlacing the leather strap. But there is another side to this ledger, a side that I have been tracking for a very long time. She opened the portfolio. It wasn't a few sheets of paper. It was a dossier. Gabriella, Beatrice said, sliding a photograph across the table to me. Do you remember 6 years ago when you tried to apply for a business loan to expand your firm? You were rejected. The bank told you your debt-to-income ratio was too high. I nodded slowly. I remember. They said I had a defaulted mortgage on a property in Nevada. I told them it was a mistake. I spent months fighting it, but the records were sealed. I assumed it was identity theft by a stranger. It was identity theft, Beatrice agreed. But it wasn't a stranger. She slid a document toward Grant. He looked at it, and the remaining color drained from his face. It was a mortgage deed for a condo in Las Vegas. You bought a vacation rental, Beatrice said to Grant. But you didn't use your credit. You used Gabriella's social security number. You forged her signature on the loan documents. And when the market turned and the property value tanked, you didn't sell it. You just stopped paying. I felt the room spin. You defaulted on purpose? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You let it go to foreclosure in my name? I had to, Grant said, his voice rising in a desperate whine. If I had taken the hit, it would have ruined my credit. I needed my score for the Blackwell background check. You didn't need good credit. You were just doing freelance work. I figured it wouldn't matter to you. It took me 4 years to rebuild my score, I said, the anger burning cold in my chest. I lived in a studio apartment with no heat, because no landlord would rent to me. I lost clients because I couldn't get a line of credit for software. You knew this? You watched me struggle and you knew? I didn't think it would be that bad, Grant deflected. There is more, Beatrice said. She turned a page in the dossier. 3 years ago, a credit line opened at a luxury car dealership in Miami, $120,000. I never went to Miami, I said. No, Beatrice said. But Grant did, and so did Brielle. She pulled out a grainy black and white photo. It looked like a surveillance shot from a bank or a dealership desk. It showed a woman with blonde hair signing a document. That is Brielle, I said. And this, Beatrice said, holding up a photocopy of the signed document, is the signature she wrote. I leaned in. The handwriting was looped and elegant, totally unlike Brielle's usual jagged scrawl. It read, Gabriella Foster. She practiced, I realized. She practiced my signature. She didn't just practice it, Beatrice said. She perfected it. Brielle has been impersonating you on the phone with banks for 5 years. Gabriella, whenever Grant needed a limit increase, whenever a payment was late and needed an extension, Brielle called in. She claimed to be you. She used your mother's maiden name as the security answer. I looked at my parents. My mother had her hand over her mouth, horror-struck. Did you know? I asked them. No, my mother cried. We knew they were using creative financing, but we didn't know they were using your name. You gave them my social security card, I said. When I moved out, I left it in the safe. You gave it to him. My father looked down. He said he needed it for the trust fund paperwork. We didn't know he was going to use it for this. I turned to Grant. He was trembling now, not with fear, but with a strange, vibrating rage. Brielle knew, I said. She knew I was the one paying for your mistakes, and she helped you steal my identity to fund her lifestyle. That purse she carries? The one that cost $4,000? Did I pay for that too? She deserves nice things, Grant shouted. She is a woman of class, not like you, hoarding money, living like a monk. We needed that money to maintain appearances. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to be me? To be you? I laughed, a harsh sound. Grant, you aren't anyone. You are a collage of fraud held together by my money. I am the eldest son, he screamed, standing up again. I am the one who matters. Beatrice slammed the portfolio shut. The sound was like a gunshot. You are a criminal, she said, and I have been documenting every felony for the last 2 years. Grant looked at her, confused. You knew? Why didn't you stop me? Because I wanted to see if you would stop yourself, Beatrice said, and because I wanted to see if your parents would ever wake up, but mostly, I was waiting for Gabriella. She looked at me with a fierce pride. I knew you had the strength to take him down, she said, but you had to find it on your own. You had to stop protecting him until you were ready to cut the cord. My evidence would have just been another mess for you to clean up. She turned back to Grant. But now, the cord is cut. This dossier goes to the district attorney on Monday morning. Identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, conspiracy. You can't do that, Grant pleaded, falling to his knees. It was pathetic. The arrogance was gone, stripping him down to the core of cowardice. Aunt B, please, I am family. You can't send family to jail. You stopped being family when you stole your sister's name, Beatrice said coldly. I stood up and walked around the table until I was standing directly in front of Grant. He looked up at me, his face wet with tears and sweat. I had one question left, the question that had been haunting me since the engagement party. Grant, I said. He sniffed, looking at me with a glimmer of hope. Gabby, please, tell her not to do it. Answer me one thing, I said, and be honest, for the first time in your life. I leaned down so our faces were level. You stole the money. You stole my credit. You stole my work. But you didn't just use me. You mocked me. You called me a failure in front of everyone. You made sure I felt small. I paused, searching his eyes. Did you do all of this just to get rich? Or did you keep sabotaging me, ruining my credit, and draining my accounts because you were terrified that if I was free, I would outshine you? Grant went still. The tears stopped. His expression shifted, the mask slipping completely. For a second, I saw the pure, unadulterated envy that had been rotting him from the inside out since we were children. You were always the smart one, he whispered. The venom in his voice was palpable. Even when we were kids, you did the math in your head. You remembered everything. Mom and Dad clapped for me, but they looked at you to make sure the bills were paid. He sneered, his face twisting into something ugly. I hated it. I hated how easy it was for you. So yes, I took your credit. I took your name. Because if you were busy drowning, you couldn't look down on me. I wanted you to be the failure so I could finally be the success. The room gasped. My mother let out a low wail of anguish. He had admitted it. It wasn't about the money. It was about power. It was about keeping me on my knees so he could feel tall. I straightened up. I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. Thank you, I said. That is all I needed to hear. I turned to Beatrice. Send the dossier, I said. No! Grant lunged for my legs, trying to grab me. Gabby, no, you can't. The security guards were on him in a second, hauling him back. He kicked and screamed, hurling curses at me, at Beatrice, at his parents. I will kill you, he screamed as they dragged him toward the door. I will ruin you. You are nothing without me. I am everything without you, I said calmly. The doors closed, silencing his tantrum. I looked at my parents. My father was weeping silently. My mother looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. We didn't know, my father whispered. Gabriella, we didn't know he hated you. You didn't want to know, I said, because as long as he was the golden boy, you didn't have to look at your own failures as parents. I picked up my purse. I am leaving now, I said. Do not call me. Do not come to my office. If Grant needs a lawyer, I suggest you sell the house, because I am not paying for it. Gabriella, Aunt Beatrice said, where are you going? I am going to press charges against Brielle, I said. She signed my name. She can share the cell. Beatrice smiled. It was a vicious, satisfied smile. Good girl, she said. I walked out of the house, past the broken vase, past the security guards, and into the cool night air. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank, a direct deposit from the Blackwell Trust. Beatrice must have transferred the stolen $50,000 back to me, with interest. But it wasn't the money that made me smile as I got into my car. It was the realization that Grant was right about one thing. I was the smart one, and I had finally proven it. The morning after the dinner at Aunt Beatrice's estate, I did not go to work. I did not go to see my parents. I did not answer the 43 missed calls from my mother. Instead, I drove to a glass tower in the Cherry Creek district to meet with a man named Julian Vance. Julian was not a family friend. He was not a corporate attorney for Blackwell. He was a shark in a bespoke suit who specialized in high-conflict civil litigation and identity fraud. I had hired him for one reason. He did not care about feelings. He cared about winning. I sat in his office, which smelled of leather and intimidation, and laid out the dossier Aunt Beatrice had given me. "This is aggressive," Julian said, flipping through the pages of the mortgage fraud documents. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "You are looking at filing federal charges against your brother and his fiancée. This isn't a slap on the wrist, Ms. Foster. This is scorching the earth." "I don't want to scorch the earth," I said calmly. "I want to sterilize it. Grant has used my name as a shield for 10 years. I want it back." Julian nodded. A predator acknowledging another predator. "We will need independent verification. The dossier is a good start, but we need forensic authentication for the signatures. We need to trace the wire transfers from the Miami dealership directly to an IP address associated with them. We need to separate this completely from the Blackwell embezzlement case." "Why separate it?" I asked. "Because the Blackwell case is about greed," Julian said. "This case is about identity. If we lump them together, Grant's defense will try to paint it all as one big, messy family misunderstanding involving corporate funds. We need to prove that even if Blackwell Logistics never existed, your brother and his fiancée were systematically dismantling your financial existence for their own gain." I wrote a check for the retainer, $25,000. It was a lot of money, but thanks to the return of my trust fund, I could afford it. And frankly, I would have paid double to see the look on Grant's face when he realized he was fighting a war on 2 fronts. By Wednesday, the forensic handwriting analysis was complete. I met with the expert, a woman who had testified in over 300 fraud cases. She placed the dealership contract under a microscope hooked up to a monitor. "Here," she pointed to the loop of the G in the signature. "See the hesitation mark? The pen stopped for a fraction of a second. That is the sign of a forger trying to recall the muscle memory of someone else's hand. And here, the pressure points are all wrong. A natural signature flows. This was drawn." She handed me a report that was 50 pages thick. "It is a crude imitation," she concluded. "Practiced, but crude. In a court of law, this is indisputable." With the expert opinion in hand, Julian filed the civil suit. We also submitted a formal complaint to the Federal Bureau of Investigation regarding the identity theft. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. I had set a rule for myself not to answer, but Julian had advised me to take one call, just one, to set the terms. "Gabriella." My mother's voice was ragged. She sounded like she hadn't slept in days. "The police were here. They seized Grant's laptop. They took his passport." "He is a flight risk, Mother," I said, typing away at my laptop as I spoke. "He forged signatures to buy property. He has offshore accounts." "He is your brother," she wailed. "You are destroying him. He is sitting in his room in the dark. He won't eat. Brielle hasn't called him in 2 days. He has no one." "He has you," I said. "And Dad, that is more than I had when I was eating ramen noodles to pay off his gambling debts." "We can fix this," she pleaded. "Dad is talking to a loan shark, a private lender. We can sell the cabin. We can pay you back the money for the condo. Just drop the charges. Please, Gabriella. If he goes to prison, he will die in there." "I don't want the money," I said. "I want the record. I want a judgment that states, legally, that Grant Foster is a fraud. I want my credit report scrubbed clean. And I want him to allocate 50% of his future earnings to a restitution fund until every cent he stole from the family trust is repaid." "He has no earnings," she cried. "Blackwell fired him. No one will hire him." "Then he can work at a gas station," I said, "like I did during college." "You are heartless," she whispered. No, Mother, I said. I am just finally using the head for business that you always ignored. I hung up. I did not feel guilty. The strange thing was, the more they begged, the more I realized that they weren't mourning Grant's actions. They were mourning the loss of the fantasy they had built around him. They were mourning the image of the successful family. Then came the turning point. On Thursday morning, Julian called me. We have a visitor, he said. She wants to make a deal. I arrived at Julian's office an hour later, sitting in the reception area, wearing dark sunglasses and a trench coat like a character from a bad spy movie, was Brielle. She looked terrible. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Her nails were chipped, and she was shaking. When she saw me, she didn't sneer. She didn't make a snide comment about my shoes. She flinched. We went into the conference room. Brielle sat on the edge of her chair, clutching her $4,000 purse, the one I had unknowingly paid for, like it was a life preserver. My lawyer says I am looking at 5 to 10 years for conspiracy and fraud, Brielle said. Her voice was brittle. Because I signed the papers. You did sign the papers, I said. We have the forensic report. I only did it because Grant made me, she blurted out. He told me it was fine. He said you knew about it. He said you were letting us use your credit because you didn't need it. He said it was a family arrangement. And you believe that? I asked. You believed that I would voluntarily ruin my credit score so you could drive a luxury convertible in Miami? Brielle looked down. I didn't ask questions. As long as the money was there, I didn't ask. That is not a defense, Brielle, Julian interjected smoothly. That is willful ignorance. It won't keep you out of jail. Brielle took a deep breath. She reached into her bag and pulled out a hard drive. I don't want to go to jail, she whispered. I have a reputation. I have a brand. What is on the drive? I asked. Everything, she said. Grant didn't trust the cloud. He kept a shadow ledger. It has the passwords to the crypto wallets where he hid the bulk of the Blackwell money. It has the recordings he made of his meetings with the offshore bankers. And she paused, looking at me with fearful eyes. And it has the emails he sent to your parents, the ones where he told them explicitly that he was using your identity, and they told him to be careful not to get caught. I felt the air leave my lungs. My parents knew, I said, explicitly. They knew about the mortgage, Brielle confirmed. They knew about the car. Grant told them he needed to use your name because his debt utilization was too high. Your father replied, just make sure the statements go to a P.O. box so she doesn't see them. My hands clenched into fists on the table. It wasn't just negligence. It wasn't just favoring the son. It was active, conspiratorial betrayal. My father had authorized the theft of my life to protect Grant's ego. If I give you this, Brielle said, pushing the drive across the table, I want immunity from the civil suit. I want you to drop me from the complaint. I looked at the drive. It was the final nail. It was the nuclear option that would obliterate not just Grant, but my parents' feigned innocence as well. You are still liable for the criminal charges, Julian warned her. We cannot control the district attorney. I know, Brielle said, tears leaking from under her sunglasses. But I can cut a deal with them if I give them Grant. I just need you to leave me alone financially. I have no money left. Grant spent it all. I looked at this woman, this shallow, materialistic creature who had spent years looking down on me at family gatherings. She was pathetic. She was willing to sell out the man she was supposed to marry in 2 months to save her own skin. Fine, I said. We drop the civil claim against Brielle Miller, assuming the data on this drive is real. It is real, she said. He is done, Gabriella. He just doesn't know it yet. Brielle left the office quickly, like the building was on fire. I sat there with Julian, staring at the drive. You have them, Julian said quietly. All of them. Your brother, your parents. This proves conspiracy. Yes, I said. It does. What do you want to do? Set the deposition, I said. Monday morning. I want Grant there. I want my parents there. And I want a court reporter. A deposition? Julian asked. Usually, we would just move to summary judgment with this evidence. I don't want a judgment mailed to them, I said. I want to look them in the eye when they realize that I know everything. I want them to hear the recordings. I want my father to hear his own voice authorizing the theft of my name. Julian smiled. It was a terrifying expression. Monday morning it is. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I did not leave my apartment. I reviewed every file on Brielle's drive. The depth of the betrayal was staggering. There were text messages from my mother asking Grant if Gabriella's credit is still holding up, so they could lease a new car for themselves. They had been feeding off me like parasites for years, all while treating me like the family failure. Grant was quiet, too quiet. According to the grapevine, which in Denver meant the network of executive assistants, Grant had been trying to secure a high-powered defense attorney, but his checks were bouncing. His friends, the ones who drank his champagne and laughed at his jokes about me, had all blocked his number. He was alone. Monday morning arrived. The sky was a brilliant, hard blue. I walked into the conference room at Julian's firm at 9 o'clock sharp. My parents were already there, sitting on one side of the long table. They looked small and fragile. My father's hands were shaking. Grant sat separately, at the end of the table. He was wearing a suit that looked like he had slept in it. His eyes were bloodshot. When I walked in, he looked up, and for a second, I saw a flash of the old Grant. The arrogance, the entitlement. "This is a mistake, Gabby," he said, his voice raspy. "You don't want to do this. We are family. You are going to ruin us all." "I am not ruining anyone, Grant," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. Julian sat to my right. A court reporter sat in the corner, fingers poised over her machine. "I am just balancing the books." "Where is Brielle?" Grant asked, looking around. "She is supposed to be here. She is a defendant, too." I looked at him calmly. "Brielle isn't coming, Grant." "Why not?" "Because," I said, placing the hard drive on the table with a soft click, "she decided that she looks better as a witness than as a co-conspirator." Grant stared at the drive. He recognized it. It was his backup. The one he kept in a safe he thought only he knew the combination to. His face turned a color I had never seen on a human being before, a sickly, translucent gray. She wouldn't," he whispered. "She did," I said, "and she gave me the emails. Grant, the ones between you and Dad." I looked at my father. He squeezed his eyes shut and lowered his head. "So," I said, opening the file folder in front of me, "let's begin. State your name for the record. Grant." The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the soft tap-tap-tap of the court reporter's keys. It was the sound of the end, and I was the one conducting the symphony. The recording of my father's voice filled the sterile conference room. It was crystal clear, captured on a high-fidelity microphone Grant had concealed in his pocket during a family lunch 3 years ago. "Just make sure the statements go to a post office box so she does not see them," my father's voice said on the tape. "Gabriella does not check her credit report. She is too busy working. Use the money to get the BMW. You need to look the part for the board members." Julian pressed the stop button. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. My father did not look up. He stared at his hands, which were clenched so tightly on the mahogany table that his knuckles were white. My mother was weeping silently, a hand over her mouth, but her tears no longer moved me. They were the tears of people who had been caught, not people who were sorry. Grant sat at the end of the table. He was vibrating with a manic energy, his eyes darting between Julian, the court reporter, and me. He looked like a wolf that had chewed off its own leg to escape a trap, only to realize it was still inside a cage. "That is out of context," Grant stammered, his voice cracking. "We were talking about a surprise gift. We were planning a surprise for Gabriella." "A surprise mortgage?" Julian asked, his tone dry. "A surprise default? A surprise identity theft?" "It was a loan!" Grant shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "I was going to pay it back. I am Grant Foster. I always pay it back." "You have never paid back a cent in your life," I said. My voice was calm. I did not need to shout. I held all the cards. You paid with my money. You paid with my credit. You paid with my reputation. And now, the bill has come due. Julian slid a document across the table. It was thick, bound in blue legal paper. This is a stipulated judgment, Julian explained. It admits to the civil fraud and identity theft. It agrees to the immediate liquidation of your personal assets, the condo, the cars, the watch on your wrist, to pay restitution to Gabriella. It also includes a confession of judgment that we can file immediately if you miss a single payment on the balance. Grant looked at the paper as if it were radioactive. He looked at our parents. "Mom, Dad, say something," he pleaded. "She is robbing me. She is stripping me naked." My father finally looked up. His face was gray, the face of a man who realized his legacy was a lie. "We cannot stop her, Grant," he whispered. "She has the tapes." "So what?" Grant snarled. He stood up, pacing the small room. "Let her sue. I will fight it. I will drag this out for 10 years. I will make sure every legal fee comes out of her pocket. You think you can break me, Gabby? I have connections. I have friends in high places. Warren Blackwell loves me." The door to the conference room opened. Grant froze. Warren Blackwell walked in. He was not alone. Walking beside him, leaning on her cane but moving with the unstoppable force of a glacier, was Aunt Beatrice. The air in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. "Warren," Grant breathed, a desperate smile flickering onto his face. "Thank God. You need to tell them. Tell them about the Western Node. Tell them how valuable I am." Warren did not smile. He did not offer a hand. He walked to the head of the table and stood next to me. He placed a single file on the table next to the hard drive. "The Western Node is a crime scene, Grant," Warren said. His voice was low, the same soft rumble he had used at the party. "And the FBI is currently tagging evidence in your office." Grant stumbled back, hitting the wall. No, that is a misunderstanding." "I read the report Gabriella sent me," Warren continued. "I saw the shell companies. I saw the emails where you tried to frame her. I saw the theft of $50 million in projected value." Warren turned to look at me, and for a brief moment, his eyes were warm. Then he turned back to Grant, and they were ice. "I offered you a way out, Grant, at the party. I told you to meet me at 8 o'clock. I was going to fire you then, quietly, for incompetence." Grant's eyes went wide. "But then you had to open your mouth," Warren said. "You had to humiliate your sister. You had to call her a failure. You forced me to look at her. And when I looked at her, I realized she was the only competent foster in the room." "She is a nothing," Grant screamed, losing control completely. "She is a secretary, a bean counter." "She is the reason you are not in handcuffs yet," Aunt Beatrice said. Grant whipped around to face her. "You too? You are siding with her?" "I am siding with the truth," Beatrice said. She stepped forward and pointed her cane at Grant's chest. "You are done, Grant. The family trust has been frozen. Your parents' assets have been placed under a conservatorship which I control. There is no more money. There is no more safety net. The bank of Mom and Dad is closed permanently." Grant looked at our parents. They nodded slowly, defeated. "You can sign the papers Gabriella has prepared," Beatrice said. "You can admit to what you did, liquidate your assets, and pay her back. If you do, Warren has agreed not to press federal charges for the corporate embezzlement, provided you disappear from the industry forever." "And if I don't?" Grant challenged, though his voice was trembling. "Then I give the hard drive to the prosecutor," I said. "And you go to federal prison for 20 years, and Mom and Dad go for 5 years as accessories." The room went silent. My mother let out a small whimper. "You wouldn't," Grant said. "You wouldn't send them to jail." "Try me," I said. I looked him dead in the eye. I let him see the 15 years of neglect, the years of eating instant noodles, the years of being the punchline to his jokes. I let him see that the sister who used to fix his toys was gone, and in her place was a woman who knew exactly what she was worth. I am the family failure, remember? I said softly. Failures have nothing to lose. You are the one with everything to lose. Grant looked at the paper. He looked at Warren, who was checking his watch. He looked at Beatrice, who was glaring at him with disgust. He looked at his parents, who were broken. He realized, finally, that the charm was gone. The smile didn't work. The lies didn't work. He sat down. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He signed the deed to the condo. He signed the title to the cars. He signed the confession. My father signed next, then my mother. They signed away their right to manage their own finances, handing control to Beatrice to ensure I was repaid. When it was done, Julian gathered the papers. The transfer of assets will begin tomorrow, Julian said. You have 48 hours to vacate the condo. Grant, keys on my desk by Friday. Grant did not speak. He just sat there, staring at the table, a hollow shell of a man. Warren placed a hand on my shoulder. Gabriella, walk with me. I stood up. I didn't say goodbye to my parents. There was nothing left to say. I didn't say goodbye to Grant. He wasn't my brother anymore. He was just a bad debt that I had finally written off. I walked out of the conference room with Warren and Aunt Beatrice. We walked through the marble lobby of the law firm and out onto the street. The sun was blindingly bright. The air smelled of exhaust and freedom. I have a new contract for you, Warren said as we stood on the sidewalk. Chief Financial Officer, Blackwell Logistics needs someone who can actually see the numbers. I smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached my eyes. I have my own firm, Warren, I said. Hartwell Bridge Advisory, but I am accepting new clients. My rate just went up to $1,000 an hour. Warren laughed. It was a deep, genuine sound. I expected nothing less. Send me the engagement letter. He shook my hand and got into his waiting car. Aunt Beatrice tapped her cane on the pavement. You did well, child. Your grandfather would have been proud. Not because you won, but because you finally fought. Thank you, Aunt Beatrice, I said, for keeping the receipts. Someone had to, she said with a wink. Now, go. You have a life to live, and I believe you have a reservation at a very expensive restaurant to celebrate. I do, I said. I watched her get into her car. Then I turned and walked down the street. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the credit bureau. Dispute resolved. Fraudulent accounts removed. Score updated. 820. I took a deep breath. I thought back to that night in Aspen. The cold wind, the laughter, Grant's arm around my shoulder, heavy and suffocating. This is Gabriella, the failure of the family. He had been right, in a way. I was a failure at being their victim. I was a failure at being their doormat. I was a failure at being the silent, invisible girl they wanted me to be. And as I merged into the crowd of the city, walking with my head high and my future entirely my own, I decided that failure was the most beautiful title I had ever earned, because the only thing I had truly failed to do was let them destroy me. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Gabriella and her fight for justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please drop a comment down below and let me know your city or country. Let's see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need a little victory in their day. See you in the next story.